Gossiping is all around us. What is the best way to stop gossiping and stay an authentic Christian? Man, it is such a huge temptation, isn't it? And it does go back to our own sinful nature. I think the goal of gossiping is to put somebody else down to elevate ourselves. It's a very poor form of doing that because we're sinners and because we hear it all the time. And usually when somebody comes to us with something negative to say to another person, our immediate result is to continue on with that conversation. But it is so wrong. And it's just so wrong and so unfair. And the Bible is pretty clear that there's never to be any corrupting speech that comes out of our mouth. And that's in Ephesians chapter 4, if you want to look at that. And he's speaking specifically about speaking negatively or critically about other people. He says that's never to happen. And the way to replace that, it goes on, and he says the way to replace this is let all of your speech be uplifting, filled with grace, and lifting up other people. Now, what is gossip? Sometimes people will say, well, it's not gossip because it's true. If they're not present, if they're not there to defend themselves, it's still gossip, even if you're convinced that it's true. And I heard this from a reliable source, and I really trust that source. I've heard plenty of things from really reliable sources that were either completely untrue or that were just twisted. Because something, let's say I have Mike here. Let's go back to Mike and I, because I trust Mike fully. But let's say Mike and I, we got some issues, and Mike said some things to me he shouldn't have said. And come to think of it, you've really said some awful things to me, Mike. So let's say Mike says some things to me that hurt my feelings, and then I go on to somebody else, and I'm talking to Rod, and I say, what Mike said to me, and he said, that really hurt. Now, if I'm going to pass on whatever Mike said to me without Mike being there, I'm naturally going to say it in such a way that it's going to be slanted towards me. We know that we're all that way. Just admit it. You are that way too. We're going to twist those things so that we look better and the other person we're trying to put down looks worse. It's just not fair ever to do that. Mike's not there to defend himself. And then the real problem of it is, even if Rod doesn't pass on that gossip, all of a sudden now Rod knows that I'm willing to talk about Mike behind his back. Mike doesn't know about this. I may be going around talking to all kinds of people about Mike. He has no idea, unless somebody has the courage to say to me, first of all, hey, listen, that isn't right. Let me go. I'm going to talk to Mike about that. And that's how I always handle it. I'm always fair. I always say, if you're going to talk to me about Brian, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to talk to Brian about it. That's only fair. Brian needs to know that somebody is saying these things about him. Now, first and foremost, I'm going to try to get them to go to him, or I'll do it with them to make sure that, what they really told me, they admit to Brian that that's what they said. So that's the way to deal with it. If you find yourself struggling with this sin, I think we all do at times. I catch myself saying negative and critical things about other people when I shouldn't be. If you find yourself struggling with this sin, the best thing to do is to overcome it by doing the opposite and to speak highly of those people. So if I'm tempted to say negative things about another person, instead what I will work on doing is point out all the positives. But now don't take that wrong. If you hear me saying, hey, Brian's a great worship leader and stuff, that doesn't mean that I'm tempted to say bad things about him, okay? We should just be that way anyway. We should be encouraging people anyway. Let me define gossip for you, because I think that's important. Gossip is saying anything negative about another person who is not there to anybody who is not in a position to solve the problem. So getting it off your chest, that's not right. Don't excuse your gossip by saying I had to get it off my chest or I had to bounce it off somebody else. You can bounce it off God. Or you can go to somebody that may be a counselor, somebody that can help solve the problem, but not to somebody where there's a mutual relationship.